Welcome back to the House Judiciary Committee this Thursday afternoon, April 30th. So we're looking at it's actually one pretty narrow, I think, proposed amendment for the DMV bill, dealing with an issue that this committee has dealt with quite a bit in the past, and that's automatic license plate readers. And the proposal, from what I understand, is simply extending a sunset for that, but I'll let Damien explain that a little better than I can. And the question is, is there some additional things that we might want to do, given an understanding that these are being used in Burlington, and we have some privacy concerns or concerns about the data actually being shared just generally, and that those are prohibitions I think we've had before. So anyway, with that very brief introduction, if you can give us a little further introduction as far as the ALPR or.
And is the language just on our web page?
Yes.
Okay.
I printed out a version after we hadn't meant to.
And I don't know that the language is in that bill even yet. So I think
This is a
Damien
proposed,
has,
okay.
I mean, the language is very simple.
Where the proposed amendment is coming from? Is it coming from us?
No, this is a proposed amendment that I think, I'm not sure who was proposed. Over to you, Damien.
Okay. Thank you. Oriented.
For the record, I'm Damian Leonard from the Office of Legislative Counsel. It's nice to make my annual visit to the Judiciary Committee. So I feel like I get one of these every year, and it's always a good time. So my understanding of this is that the City of Burlington has asked the House Transportation Committee to consider extending the sunset on Vermont's current law, which permits law enforcement officers who have been certified by our Criminal Justice Council. Sorry, I was trying to remember the correct term there again. I only get in here once a year, so a little rusty on that.
Always good to see you.
But so certified law enforcement officers currently in Vermont law can use license plate readers for bona fide law enforcement purposes. There is also a law in the books that allows the Agency of Transportation to undertake a pilot program to use speed cameras in work zones. However, for a variety of reasons, that pilot program has never been carried out. The law currently is set to sunset on July 1, 2027. When that sunset occurs, it will be replaced with a prohibition on the use of license plate readers or speed cameras, which we call ATLE, or automated traffic law enforcement in the statute. But they could include red light cameras in the future. For purposes of the pilot, it's just a speed camera. So the request from Burlington is fairly straightforward. It would take the existing language repealing portions of that law and delay it from July 1, 2027 until July 1, 2029, and delete a contingent repeal that the contingency was never met and it's passed. So the key piece is that coming off of this very simple looking repeal, you get the addition of the language that prohibits the use of this technology in Vermont, as well as additional changes to the statute, removing definitions and removing language allowing for the use and relating to how it can be used.
So it's repealing the sunset, it's not extending the sunset.
It's extending the sunset. It's delaying it by 2 years. And then when the sunset kicks in, there are several sections that have contingent effective dates for, there's a new section that puts an outright express prohibition on the use of the technology. And then there are a few other sections that make changes to the underlying law. Essentially, a way to describe it would be that it's mothballing the existing law, preserving some framework there, but essentially limiting it to what do we do with the data we already have.
So this language does that, makes those changes?
This language, when this section takes effect, those changes are tied to the effective date of this section. So they're not in the language you see in front of you. But if we go back to the bill that this committee worked on with my former colleague, Ben Novogrodsky, a couple of years ago, in that bill, you can see the language that makes those changes. And I'm happy to pull that up.
I'm still a little confused. So if we don't extend the sunset, that language goes into play, or okay, we don't extend.
Yeah, and so we still have a year before the sunset kicks in. So this is something that you could do it this year. You could wait to come back to it next year because the sunset isn't kicking in yet. I can't speak for the municipalities. My understanding is that a few municipalities in the state have or have had at some point the license plate readers. I've seen some articles out there talking about municipalities that at least one municipality in southern Vermont that used license plate readers to solve a robbery. Other than that, though, I can't speak to the specifics of how they're currently being used or why Burlington or other municipalities would want to keep this on the books. But by pushing this out, you're essentially delaying all of the changes that you enacted a few years ago when I think you pushed out the sunset at that time. And you're delaying all of those changes by an additional 2 years.
Karen had her hand up.
Yeah, so I believe you said this, but when is the current sunset?
It is next July 1, so not July 1, 2026, but July 1, 2027.
And this is bumping it 2 more years.
Bumping it 2 more years.
And then I don't think you shared, and the question I was asking the chair of, so this is a proposed amendment right now?
This is a proposed amendment. It is not in the current draft of the miscellaneous motor vehicle bill.
Do we know who is proposing it or like how this came to be?
My understanding is that the committee was asked to consider it by a representative from Burlington. So, or by a representative of the city. I don't think necessarily a representative. I want to be clear since we're in the house here.
Okay.
But a representative from the city.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
So 2 things I just wanted to get a little bit of clarity on. I know that the city of Burlington is currently using it for parking and had expressed interest in using it for law enforcement stuff. So I'm wondering, tied with that, maybe it's one thing, is I'm not sure the last time the police academy trained people to get certified. And I don't know if you have any information on that.
I don't have information on that. I would have to defer to the police academy. But it is
Have to be certified to.
Yeah, so the way the definitions currently read, law enforcement officer is an individual certified by the Criminal Justice Council as a level 2 or 3 law enforcement officer who's a state police, municipal police, sheriff, or deputy sheriff or constable. And then, so they one have to be level 2 or 3. And then the actual use of the license plate recognition systems or license plate readers provides, and I'll share my screen again. It provides that a law enforcement officer shall be certified in ALP operation by the Criminal Justice Council in order to operate an ALPR system. And then again, deployment, it speaks to the intent, who can access the active data, which is the recently read data before it goes into storage at what is now the Vermont Intelligence Center. And so it has to be used for legitimate law enforcement purposes, and must be approved by a supervisor. And it can only be accessed by a law enforcement officer. So that's the current statute on the ALPR use and data access. And then there's additional information on historical data. It can be transmitted to out-of-state law enforcement or other persons out of state who have a legitimate law enforcement purpose. And then after 6 months, there are limitations on when the VIC can disclose historical data, including pursuant to a warrant, in connection with the prosecution or defense of a pending criminal charge. And then otherwise, it's not subject to discovery or subpoena in a civil action, et cetera. So it's purely for law enforcement and criminal justice purposes.
So normally, when something sunsets, we would have taken it up next year. Do you know why it came up this year to extend it 2 years? Again, normally we'd be taking up at this time next year, or even probably a little earlier in the session, if we had, take testimony and that type of thing.
I am not sure why the request has come in
Right.
at this point in the session,
Yeah.
and not next year or earlier this year.
Everything you read, that's everything we've done in here since
Right.
we've been here. And I supported almost all of it. Because, privacy issues, and that type of thing. I don't know. I still support it. I don't know if my personal stance is as strong as it used to be on the license plate readers, and maybe that's because we've already done a lot of work on it, but I don't think it's a rush to extend it, but because we do have another year, but I would have trouble letting it sunset and changing without taking any testimony, because by not doing anything, that's where all the changes are. And it would, if we tended to lean that way, I think we would definitely need to take testimony.
On allowing it or extending the sunset, you think?
Not
Not
extending. I don't know if we need to go 2 years, because that puts it out 3 years, which that's fine, I guess 2 years, it puts it out 3 years. I may have even in the past lobbied to go longer than 2 years on some of it. Yeah, so again, my issue would be if we're gonna let it sunset and not take testimony. So, but as far as sunsetting it goes, the status quo, things are working pretty good. And I would the part I'd hate to see go away right now is the safety part of it, using it for speed control for our crews out on the highway. So, and hopefully that pilot program can be instituted someday, when the resources are there. But anyway, that's my stance.
So I guess one question I have is whether this is an appropriate opportunity to, are there areas that have come up that we've heard about, or specifically with what Burlington is intending to do, that we should take the opportunity to look at, any further restrictions we want to put on it, not restrictions, or how different is what Burlington is planning on doing from what we have anticipated? And I'm not sure that that's not a question for Damien. It's a question for whoever wants this. I mean, do you know more about that, Barbara, as far as what?
I have talked, well, over the years, I've talked to our mayor about, and I've talked to one of their lobbyists who's in the room, and she may want to say a few more words, but they were concerned about law enforcement shortages and looking at using ALPRs for violations, speeding, etc. I believe. They are currently, but the part that's confusing is Burlington currently uses a license plate reader software called Ames that, and parking enforcement has gotten moved out of out of the police department and moved to the Department of Public Works. So it is not being conducted by law enforcement officers, but it's not an ALPR system. However, one of the things that I've had contact with the Department of Public Works about is a lot of companies that own the systems or run the software have been known to be sharing or selling their data. And that obviously would go against what our law does. And so I'm not sure Ames does, but actually Park Mobile might. I've been contacted by a reporter who's been looking into if Park Mobile is sharing license plate data
Isn't it in the bill or in the law that
that they can't.
the stuff can't be sold? I believe we put that in
It
there.
is, but Burlington isn't selling it. So one thing that I was proposing to Martin is that we add language that says that they need to sign agreements with their vendors to make sure that the vendor is following state law.
Why can't we do that?
Well, we could.
No, we could require that.
Right.
And you don't get the reports anymore because we kept hearing no one's using it. But it turns out that that might not be true. It's just nobody is reporting on it.
So why don't we hear from Gail to get a little more background? Would you be available just to tell us a little background on what the situation is and want to try to, and maybe we will have Damien look a little closer to tell us whether that concern's already addressed as far as, yeah, because I know there's restrictions on state entity that was collecting the data, but we specifically didn't put restrictions on private entities, but that wasn't private entities contracting with the state or municipalities. That was like if private entities have their own ALPR or
Right.
public, they can do that.
Like UDM has them.
Right. So over to you to identify yourself for the record.
Gail Satz on behalf of the city of Burlington. So I already can tell you're going to ask me questions that I don't know the answers to. Working for the city of Burlington has opened up my whole world to water discharge permits and ALPR ATLE. I'd like to just give you a little bit of background of why we are here in this room. Senator Hirschlag had introduced a bill in the Senate S-263, which addressed this part of the statutes, and time just ran out in the Senate. They took a little bit of testimony, but didn't get very far. And then just time ran out. So that's where we got the idea to just extend the sunset, just to give us a little bit of room. In the meantime, some entities at the city, the police chief and the city attorney's office came together to develop some amendments that, some of which might fit into the discussion that you've been having to add a little bit of language to this in addition to extending the sunset. But all we really wanted was to extend the sunset for this year, but would be open to some other considerations as well. So we went to the chair of House Transportation and asked him if he would consider adding the extension to the sunset in this bill. And then that bill ended up here. So that's kind of how we got here.
And timing wise, is it because of like budget planning for next year and knowing? No, okay.
No, it was really just, these are good changes that the city wanted, some of which involved confidentiality, privacy issues, and some more process issues. And time just ran out.
So that's the type of amendments that they'd be looking for.
Yes, so they were going to, I believe one of the amendments was to expand ATLE a little bit beyond what is currently in statute, the automated traffic law enforcement.
That's the speed cameras.
The speed cameras,
Yeah.
oh, that's-
Yeah. So the purge light bill would expand their use to things like red light enforcement. So you could use them or a municipality could use them at a busy intersection where there's a lot of red light violations.
Right.
Rather than stationing a cruiser there. They'd be able to use the camera. So that was something that was in the purge light bill in the Senate.
Okay. Karen,
I'm just trying to understand the situation. So it seems like there's the ask for the extension. But if we're looking at it, it's like maybe you want to do some other things too. But I'm hearing that would need testimony. I would want to better understand it because I feel like I'm barely understanding it. So for me, it comes up with a question of timing of if the priority is just to make the decision on extending it or not, that seems doable. I don't know if we have the capacity to do the testimony on the other pieces. That's what I'm hearing and understanding.
And that would be fine with us.
right, so if there's some, call it low hanging fruit or not, if there's like the issue, if we understand that there is this gap in our protection of that data because we haven't required contractors to agree to not share the data they get through the contract with Burlington, for instance. That may be something we want to address, but we are going to need more testimony for that. And I also don't want to hold transportation because we're getting, we're doing calendar math now. So I don't think we need a straw poll or anything on the extension of do you think, as far as just, I could take a straw poll on that component of it and you can work in the meantime and see if it may end up having to be a floor amendment, which would have to be narrow because we're not going to be able to figure this out today or tomorrow. And I'm not sure when they're going to be voting this out.
And I'd just like to add that the intent of the city is to do something substantive next year. But in case, just given time constraints that pop up, that would give us a little bit of breathing room if it didn't get through next year.
I would add years, which pushes it out through that answers it.
It could be one. That's fine.
Just given how the legislature can be, if we did the extension but didn't address the issue that definitely has been identified in other states and cities about the vendors sharing information, I would be uncomfortable just because it has created lots of problems in other places that I'm happy to share information about. And I know Burlington really cares about those issues as well. And the mayor definitely wanted to make sure that it was going to be a score that they were in control of where their data ended up.
So before I go to Tom, I mean, the other option is it's good till July next year. If there are some things that we need to fix, as Tom was saying earlier, we can do the extension next year. We don't have to until July 27. And then that'll give us time to make sure we have these other concerns addressed. But Tom.
I may have missed this part, maybe not, but I'm really curious as to how these violations are going to be written. Are they going to be written under Vermont civil traffic enforcement, or if they're going to be something the city of Burlington puts into an ordinance? There's
There's a lot of questions out there.
Yeah, so the current statute provides that the way they're written is, it's a fine, but it's not considered a traffic violation, so it doesn't accrue points for the individual and that sort of thing. But it is a fine there, but it doesn't count like. So if you get caught in a work zone on a camera doing 20 over the speed limit, you'll get a fine, and the fine is the same regardless of whether you're 10 over or 20 over or 30 over, if you're caught by the camera. And it doesn't count the same way as a regular speeding violation, where if it's an officer in a car and they get you with the radar gun doing 25 over, that's a specific violation for more than 20 over the speed limit, plus the doubling it because you're in a work zone, et cetera, and that comes with points. So it's a little different.
Right, but so you just separated the two things. Is your original, the thing you described first, that's gonna be just one violation, no points, be written on a Vermont civil traffic complaint ticket and filed through the traffic bureau? Or is it gonna be done by the city attorney?
Um,
For the Vermont traffic complaint ticket, if it's issued by an officer
Yep.
under the Vermont traffic law,
there you go.
you're gonna need to see operation and an operator.
Yeah, it is issued as a civil violation.
A Vermont traffic ticket?
So the language here provides that an action to enforce this section is initiated by issuing a Vermont civil violation to the owner of the motor vehicle by US mail. Civil violation shall be based on a certain update of law enforcement, include the time, date, place, include the applicable civil penalty amount, and then in compliance with the Judicial Bureau statute, include an affidavit that the issuing officer has determined the owner's military status prior to issuing the violation. And so, yeah, it's
So we're assuming the registered owner was the operator for the,
in one
For
of
the
your
violation.
defenses. Yeah, one of your defenses is that the vehicle wasn't in control of another person at the time. So there are basically two affirmative defenses that the statute provides. One is that the motor vehicle was in the control of another person at the time of violation. And two, that the system was not properly calibrated or tested at the time, and it's required to be tested each day and then calibrated on a regular schedule. And then the proceedings are in the Judicial Bureau and collected in that manner. So it's the same as a speeding ticket in terms of how you pay it. It's not the same in terms of the points.
So can I just clarify, that's not the Burlington thing that we're talking about, that's the highway safety pilot, right?
That's the camera pilot. I think in the bill that was introduced in the Senate, and it's been months now since I drafted the language for this bill, so I don't have all the particulars clear in my head. But I believe it expanded that section to allow for pilot programs in municipalities relating to things like also areas where both municipal work zones and areas with a high incidence of speeding in municipalities, and then also traffic lights where there's a high incidence of red light violations. I'm just trying.
Yeah, no, I know that you
I
have to go.
Child who's getting out of school.
We need to
grab.
move on as well.
Yes, Mike.
Yeah, go ahead, though, Karen, yeah.
Just because, yeah, they're here, and if I understand, you're representing the city of Burlington.
Yes.
And so for me, I just see that there's these kind of multiple options that we could take of just let it go and we'll revisit it next year. We could just extend the sunset 1 year, 2 years, or whatever, or we extend the sunset and look at these changes for it. I guess I'm looking for the city of Burlington's perspective. I heard you say like the sunset is the priority, but you're also hearing that there could be these other things happen.
Right,
But you prefer the sunset no matter what?
well, I mean, our priority would be if your committee or any committee would look at the contents of S 263 in full, but looking at the calendars, if you don't have the time for that, then the next priority really sort of tied between either extending the sunset or extending the sunset with some confidentiality provision.
Okay, I just feel like that's helpful, because I feel like that's
Yeah.
the city making an informed decision in it as well, that you're saying the priority is the extension, even understanding there's these other things that might not get things.
Yes.
So it seems like in the past, normally a sunset is a catalyst for us to do work. It has been. And an extension, put it out 2 years, we wouldn't have that push to do the work. It could be 3 years.
Well, I was thinking that even if you just listen to the conversation, even if you don't extend the sunset, it is now on your radar. So, that's a benefit.
Right.
We would like, we're just thinking a little extra time just in case, but if this is going to be on your radar next year, then it's not as much of a concern.
Okay, all right, so we won't send any advice one way or another at this point, at least, but I'll find out from Chair Walker just what his timing is and whether he wants us to actually give him our advice.
Thank you.
And this will, if we did nothing, toward the beginning of the year next year, Ledge Council comes in and lets us know what all the sunset bills are. So we will give another reminder if that's what we decide to do is nothing.
Yeah, because it's.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to turn attention to S-209 at this point. And we did, at the end of the morning, we heard a little bit from Jay Johnson and introduced this different building language, which is much narrower. And really in anticipation of having a vote on this tomorrow, wanted to get any more input on additions or subtractions. Talk a little bit about that, so. I mean, I can even just start with one thing that I wanted to raise as a possibility, and that's with respect to, and if you folks are looking at that 2.1, the facility at the bottom of page 20, page 2, line 20, facility regulated by the Child Development Division of the Department of Children and Families. Because I would suggest that we strike that. Because, and for a couple reasons. One is that a lot of those regulated entities are already covered in Romanet 4, the social services establishment. And also there's a little confusion, not necessarily confusion, but there's some other regulated facilities, including residential homes and foster homes and such that could cause a little confusion with respect to this. Even though foster homes generally are private and one would be able to use an administrative warrant, presumably, to go into a private residence. But I just think that that clarifies things a little bit. If I don't think it's necessary, and I think it might add a little confusion. So my recommendation is that we do strike that particular entity from this. But happy to hear input on that from anybody, and if any other input, just generally. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Can you explain what's changed in the to and from stuff?
Yeah, the to and from that. So the bill as it came over from the Senate, it had the language as far as traveling to, entering, remaining at, or returning from the court, but also all the other additional facilities and buildings and locations. And after some testimony and discussion, that didn't make sense. That really was quite ambiguous and really opened things up. And so that language would only apply to court proceedings at schools, essentially, because there are definitive times people are called to the court, and there's definitive times for schools. So it's not it's out there to determine that somebody's traveling to drop off their kids at school or pick them up. The rest would be just the premises, not the going to or returning from. the other locations. Yeah, Angela.
I was thinking because we've narrowed the language on page 2, lines 8 through 10 to, we're narrowing it on buildings owned and wholly controlled by the state or political subdivision of the state. We heard testimony early on now, several weeks ago, or months maybe, about the importance of including DMV locations. And I think there are some DMV locations that would not be in buildings that are wholly owned and controlled by the state. And I think specifically because we are a state that has driver's privilege cards, we've created a path for folks, for all Vermont residents to drive legally in the state. And so we want to encourage compliance with that law to drive legally. So I think it makes a lot of sense to include DMV locations.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the few from witnesses, the 2 locations that were really mentioned. I mean, yes, I've heard about state buildings, but it's mainly DMV locations and libraries are what I've been hearing from quite a few people, including the testimony that we received from Migrant Justice. Anything else on that at this point?
Do we need
Yeah.
do we need to have a reference on Romanet 3 for polling place? Like as defined in,
It is defined later.
oh, in another.
It's defined, it's on the last page. A polling place means a place that a municipality is designated to the Secretary of State as a polling place.
Oh, yeah.
We did have discussion when we looked this up and had Lauren for the.
So I guess to that point, should we then, to keep it the same for like, and structurally, should we just put the definition of public library in with the
Yes.
definitions instead of calling it out right there?
I will say that was why I got confused.
Okay, yeah,
Because I know we also define educational institution later on.
right.
Yeah. Okay. And so DMV would be just like another one of these ones here, like between.
With the premise.
Yeah.
On the premises of.
Anything else as far as additions, subtraction? I know that some folks don't want any of it, I do understand that, but just looking to figure out what we may vote on tomorrow.
And not just real quick, I mean, I can't support the bill, but I just want to say I do appreciate some of the changes. That were made, especially the to and from stuff and, eliminating. I wasn't as appreciative at adding state buildings back in, but, do appreciate again the to and from and some of the locations being.
And fairly narrow on the state buildings.
Right. Yeah, much
Substantial.
narrower than what even what the Senate was looking at.
Yeah, yeah.
What we had originally.
So, I mean, we can have further discussion on this now, or we can have further discussion on it tomorrow. What's people's pleasure?
Very energetic
rather
group
do
here.
I know, maybe.
I'm leaving it to other folks. I'm just kind of, I'm here to try to facilitate.
We can any more discussion.
All right, okay.
Or I'm just
Um,
myself.
Yeah. Tom, you want to weigh in now, or you want to?
Up to you.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Been writing a bunch of stuff as we've gone. Try to put it. Oh. My concerns is you're essentially creating large safe zones something that we've never had before, away from one thing we rely on to keep us safe. And that would then create to me, a very much concerning false sense of security for the ones that we're actually trying to help. Because we know Vermont law enforcement doesn't get involved in this, so if the feds do it in one of these places, and they probably would, they're gonna look to us for answers, I suppose. Seeing as we don't do civil arrest violations without a warrant anyway. It causes hesitation to be, for officers to stop being proactive. I mean, it's gonna create a reluctance to get involved in certain situations and looking deeper into other things. If somebody may be of, particular race or color, even though it's warranted in certainly a criminal matter, they may elect not to get involved in that. And that's a problem too. Because if somebody is in fact doing something wrong, then it should be addressed properly. And it also compromises officer safety. If it creates hesitation. And an example I gave just a little while ago is like if I heard something out in the hallway and I went outside and there's an ICE agent fighting with somebody, and I know there's a knowingly clause, I'm gonna instantly get involved without even thinking about it. I didn't know about it. But yeah, there's knowing, but if somebody decides to file suit on me, it's up to me to hire a lawyer and pay for it and fight that. My employer is not gonna pay for it. Same thing could happen out on the street. Or if I see them, I might just stand there and watch and let somebody get hurt. It could be the bad guy, it could be the good guy, whichever one you wanna call which. Really is concerning about exposing officers to the civil liability. This is something we don't do, and it's creating legal anyway, and then now we're putting a legal framework around us where we could be sued that we didn't have. And it hasn't been a problem with us. And I think it creates operational and legal consequences that are unprecedented out of field for. And I don't think anybody else would stand for this in their life. It's another reason not to join law enforcement. And that's all I have to say.
Can I ask one other question? And there is, we had that discussion earlier. I've discussed this with you, and I don't think I fully appreciated this one word that probably is causing you presumably, I'll ask, because you would not be knowingly, you wouldn't be executing the arrest.
No, I wouldn't.
Right, but it's the.
But I could be participating.
It's the assisting, well, it's the assisting language that is problematic.
Definitely.
Right. Because otherwise, it's like you're not making the arrest, but
Well,
so I guess, I
my
mean,
name's not signed on the warrant.
so I guess I'm wondering why we need to have, isn't it the person that, or whoever it is that is actually executing the arrest that we're most concerned about?
Well, executing the arrest and me putting my handcuff on somebody, it doesn't really matter who the name's on the warrant, if you ask me. That's all gonna be something I'm gonna have to pay for a lawyer for anyway, when
So my proposal, if we struck assisting, what do we lose? Do we gain anything? Are you saying that doesn't gain?
I don't think we'll gain much. It might stop one lawsuit. I don't see a lot of those happening anyway, because I go back to the whole situation too with Border Patrol. This is something we all know about up in the Northeast Kingdom when that gentleman was shot. He was on a car stop with some people. Local law enforcement jumped in and whisked one of these people away to the hospital because there wasn't time to wait for an ambulance and he died. Now, and they stopped and just waited for the car stop at a distance to make sure he was okay when this erupted. They were in visual contact. And they got involved when it went bad. Well, maybe next time they'll just drive by and continue going down to Dunkin' Donuts. Okay, and somebody will end up dead or better, or not be able to be saved, whatever. The help won't feel. I just don't think it's worth the false sense of security that we're adding to it and the liability to the officers. This is something we don't do. Vermont law enforcement officers do not arrest on civil laws. And I don't know how we can hold this against the feds too. It's just like too late.
I guess, I mean, it's,
So
yeah,
I'm sorry, it's just,
understood. I guess I am still troubled by the word assisting, frankly, because it's really those who are executing the arrest that is. And that is not somebody, when we're talking about administrative warrants and civil arrests in that context, that would not be local law enforcement or state law enforcement in those situations you're talking about where they stop and help. I would be inclined to strike the or assisting language because you're still going after the person who is really the culpable entity. And also it takes care of what could be vague and difficult to figure out is what constitutes assisting and how much assistance is there? From the actual arrest, does that go? I know it doesn't come all the way to a satisfied what you're saying, but I'm hoping that helps in that scenario. Yeah.
I mean, essentially, I mean, and the more I think about it too, I mean, I thought about, okay, that scenario I gave in the hallway, I run out, I help the officer. But if they're both engaged in something they're not supposed to be doing, do I cite them both for disorderly conduct or?
I don't think,
But you know what I mean?
but I don't think that's what that's.
I get it, that part, right? That's the irony of it.
I mean, the situation is that, if local state law enforcement is helping out in a manner that's not violating other policies like fair and impartial policing policies, they shouldn't be subject, to this because they're not making the arrest. Right. Yeah, Ken.
They're chastised in South Burlington, and they were found they didn't do anything wrong. So this is just gonna add more stuff to what goes on with law enforcement doing their job. Gonna be it's still gonna create everything. I think maybe we ought to go and make Vermont a sanctuary state.
I didn't vote on it.
All I was gonna do is keep emotions running very high in this room.
Yeah, all right. So any other discussion for this? We can have further discussion then. When we take this up. I think, thanks, Tom. Yeah, I trying to get closer to.
I would have saved it for tomorrow for which one we're voting for.
Oh, you can say it again tomorrow.
Yeah.
Why did you bring it up now? If we're just
Well,
gonna
no,
do
I
it?
just thought, I thought that we should have some discussion and then we had time.
But nothing's gonna change. What, so why keep?
I just changed a couple, I think, fairly important words. It doesn't go quite far enough from what I'm asking, but I think hopefully it's helpful. Sure.
That it sounds like you want to propose that thing, so if folks want to vote, I feel like you can just vote on it too. If,
On a particular change?
no, on the bill as is, like if folks feel like we just need to get this done and over with and not include that change,
Yeah, well,
I think,
well,
I would be open to that.
I'm actually, well, personally, I'm more comfortable with that change, getting conversations that we've had. I don't think we should extend to assisting. I think that becomes a little vague of who is assisting and who isn't assisting and who would be part of this. It's not.
We have to have a final draft in hand.
Yeah, you need to have fun with it, so.
So I get like what is your preference to have that change? or
I
would you
guess it
rather-
would be, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I
I know you're gonna vote no,
don't
and I
think
know.
it's gonna make much difference.
But if you had a choice of
Yes.
having that change, okay. I feel like that's what we're trying to walk that line. What's gonna be most helpful for the committee?
All right, so, yeah, go
Can I
ahead.
add something?
Yeah.
So I think I thank Tom for his perspective and for outlining those concerns. The concern that I have and the question that I have is if the chair and the majority are genuinely interested in hearing what concerns the minority has with the legislation to get to a place of yes, I think that if it's well intended and it's genuine, it's a genuine effort to find compromise, to move a piece of legislation forward and to craft it in a way that we could find a path to supporting it, that's one thing. But if the conciliatory tone and efforts in the room are being made so that we have a made for TV moment to find a single word of compromise to say, well, we heard you and we made a change, that's not a best efforts way to path to find compromise, because we've been sharing our concerns from the very beginning. We've heard from countless witnesses. We heard from the administration earlier this morning. The very fact of implementation of this in the very broad scope and intent of the legislation is so far reaching and beyond what the administration feels comfortable with. There is no single word change or rearranging of this bill that is going to get the five of us to a place of comfort, the Republicans in the Senate with a place of comfort, and certainly not the Republican governor. So I just think it is almost more insulting to sit here and hear we're going to trade one word for a good feeling, whereas it's not going to change how we're going to vote. Like, yes, you're getting it on camera. Yes, it's being played out in the public sphere, but it's not going to change anything. The time for compromise was in the months of testimony leading up to this moment where we have been asking for a seat at the table. We have continuously been told to take a back seat. That's just the benefits of being in the majority. And that's a direct quote from the chair. I just have a really tough time with that. And like you said it 3 times on camera, and I have all the clips to prove it. So we're not going to go down that road. But it's really frustrating that we're sitting here and it's like empty seats. Like, you're going to pass it, whether we're in these seats or we're out in the hallway having a conversation. So I would rather vote on it right now without any changes, and let's roll the dice. That's where it's going to be. It's going to go to the Senate and it's going to go to the governor's desk, and we'll see what he chooses to do with it.
So we're going to have a new version of it, and I disagree with your viewpoint on how we work on bills. I do try to find the compromise. I do try to implement ideas when I'm hearing concerns about things to make it better. I do understand that it still might not, and on this bill, I understand it won't, because in other conversations, there are some places where I know that I can't give and other people can't give. But I try to accommodate as much as I can, realizing in the end that I might not be able to bring people over. But it has become a better bill. I think it's a better bill that I can support, including the to and from language, including the assisting, getting rid of that language, adding a couple of things, taking out a couple of things. I think all of that through this process has made a better bill. No, was I able to come to the point where I would have a unanimous vote on this particular bill? It didn't happen. But I disagree with you as far as the process. I mean, I could have, if I wanted to, I could have passed this out before, just as it came out from the Senate. But instead, I tried to work the process and heard from concerns, including from Tom Oliver and from Tom Burdett, and tried to address those concerns, knowing that I didn't have to. I could still get the votes to do this, but I wanted to address those concerns and make this a better product, and try to accommodate them. So, I mean, I disagree with all.
Well, I would just say my own lived experience of sitting in this seat since January and, considering testimony on this bill, I feel like dragging out the process has only exacerbated tensions and frustrations in this room, which are very evident. I mean, there is no secret in the building, whether you're talking to the speaker or the president of the Senate or the governor, about the frustrations in this room, amongst the culture of the room, the tenor of the way that members are spoken to. And so I just don't think it's any secret. I think the frustrations have boiled over, and the efficacy of this committee has totally been squandered because because of those tensions. And it's a very sad thing for me. And I share that with my constituents and people that I meet across the state, is that it's a really unfortunate byproduct of the partisan world that we live in here in Montpelier. And I think this bill is a perfect encapsulation of that frustration and process. So you and I are going to agree to disagree, Chair, on the process and the intent and the tenor, but that's where we are. I just don't think holding us here any longer is going to change anything. And a change isn't going to matter certainly not to me. I'm absolutely no vote on this.
All right, so we'll adjourn until tomorrow, right after the floor, and we'll be taking up this and S4 and S208. S203, we would like to at some point discuss with and again, if we need to, well, that given just what we've heard in Rutland, where there were 4 DUIs in 1 month and they can't charge beyond a DUI 2. I think we need to think about, is there a way we can address that? And the situation you had as well.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna, I've taken that off as far as not voting on that, just to look at it and see if we can come up with
Figure out
a
something.
address
Happy to.
address those situations. So
Yeah.
we're adjourned until